Hello everybody and welcome back to another video to keep you company if you need it. It's just a nice little video here that you can just stick on in the background if you're playing some games or doing chores or doing some monotonous work or if you're trying to sleep or dare I say if you just need two voices in your head just to keep you company if you're having a bit of a rough day. And as I said, two voices because I am joined once again by Urukimania. Hello Uruk.
Hi, Scott Sword. It's a
How's it
pleasure to be back on the podcast.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. How's it going?
Been going well, thank you. How have you been?
Yeah, not too bad. For the folks at home, you're probably hearing this about 3 weeks after the previous episode, but we're actually recording this about just under a week, right? 6 days afterwards, just because scheduling. We're trying to find
Yeah.
a window to record this stuff. So yeah, it's not been as long since we've spoken to each other, but to be fair, we haven't spoken to each other too much during the week.
True.
Yeah. So how's your week? Anything exciting
Oh,
in
it's,
the world of Uruk?
it's been a good week. Nothing very exciting, but good.
I mean, the latest Translation Born came out a few days ago.
Well, sort of. I guess that's some news. So, as we had recorded our last podcast, I had just released Translation Born 83, and then I recently released Translation Born 83.
Oh, what's all
because
this? You got to talk about this drama now.
Yeah, because what happened was I did a whole opening segment where I've discovered I have a blind spot, and I've run into this before with Translation Born, but this time I really didn't see it coming. Last time I was at least confused. This time I didn't see it coming at all. So actually, before I get too into this, let me ask you, Scott Sword, are you familiar with the expression "ten a penny"?
I was gonna mention the exact same thing. No, I didn't. I was not aware of this expression. When I was watching your
Ooh.
video and I ended up looking it up because you're like, oh, it's a British expression. I was like, is it?
Oh wow.
So
Well, I
no,
found it. I found it in a British dictionary.
yeah, and it did say when I looked up myself, it did say British, and I was like, oh well, okay. What was the one that you came up with in the States? A dime a dozen.
Yes, the dime a dozen
Right.
is definitely a common saying here in the States. Is
Yeah.
that new to you as well?
I've heard of a dime a dozen, but here's the thing, because like dime is the coin, right? I don't know what
Yes.
denomination it is. Is that 10 cent or no? What's a
Yes, 10
dime?
cents.
Okay.
A dime is a
Uh,
10-cent coin. Yeah.
okay. Because obviously in the UK we use a different currency, so dime is just nothing that's in our vocabulary day to day. I've heard of dimes, obviously by watching American films and stuff, but no. Like a dime a
Yeah.
dozen is never going to be an expression that you'll hear a British person say. It'll be quite weird for them to say it. I've never heard of ten a penny, or either the other one was two a penny, right?
Yes. Yeah, the dictionary entry I found had the main section as two a penny, and then like as an aside, it was like also says 10 a penny, or not says, but like said, pronounced. It's like the other version of the same expression.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. I was going to mention it. It's an idiom. It's an expression that has just passed me by. No, I don't know that one. It might be quite old. I don't know. I was going to ask around and see if people know it or not. There's been times before, just because with, you know, looking up old idioms in English teaching textbooks and things like that. Most of them I'm quite fortunate, like because of just the upbringing I had and my
Hmm.
parents being of a slightly older generation, they know a lot of these idioms. I heard a lot of them growing up. But there are some which have caught me off guard. But then the minute I message my mom and be like, "Do you know this idiom?" She's like, "Oh yeah." So it's really funny
Hmm.
how just it can cross generational divides, or maybe it's a regional thing, or I mean, it's very possible I have heard it, but maybe I haven't just taken it in. It's not an idiom that I would just naturally go to use. So yeah, no, it was one of
Yeah.
the things I screenshot from your video, and I was like, I wanted to bring it up because I was surprised about that too. I'd learned that from your video.
Oh, that's funny. That's so I feel much less bad about making this mistake now because I had assumed in my first version of the video that I posted when I was talking about in our last podcast. I was thinking, okay, 10 a penny, that's probably based off of the expression dime a dozen, but it's sort of made more generic and made to sound older because,
Hmm.
the idea of inflation of like you go from 10 a penny to a dime a dozen, and it's like the amount you're paying is changing over time. And it's so they've like sort of created this way of taking you back in time with the expression. And because of the way that they've like reverse engineered the idiom, they're putting a spin on the base idea, which is just it's super common. There's a whole bunch of these guys because in the context of translation porn, they're talking about when hunters, people who go out and take care of these people who are transforming into beasts, are 10 a penny, dime a dozen. They're everywhere. They're super common and they're not of particularly high value. Their lives are cheap. And I didn't even get to the whole their lives are cheap implication in the first version of the video because I was so focused on isn't this amazing how the translators came up with this English expression that possibly was sort of based off of this other US English expression. And I had someone comment like 2-3 days after the video was up, like, oh yeah, actually 10 a penny, that's a super common British English expression. And I was like, uh-oh.
Oh.
that there are some mistakes that I can sort of live with, and like it doesn't necessarily mean I should change the video, but I felt like that was such a fundamental thing to get wrong that I was like, I need to go back and change that. And I opened this by talking about a blind spot. I'll let you talk in a second. Sorry, I just want to finish while I still have this in my mind.
Go for it.
Which is, it's pretty common for me when I see an English expression and I've never heard of it. My immediate reaction is usually not, oh, that must be British, right? Sometimes, sometimes it is, and sometimes I'm like, I don't understand this. Maybe it's British, or like I'll see some sort of spelling signifier and think, okay, that must be British. But I've learned I need to I didn't think I needed to look that up, and it turns out I needed to look that up. So I'm going to be a little bit more cautious of English language expressions that I find in the script for this game going forward.
Yeah, I have the same issue because even though like I try quite hard to keep the British English language going as much as possible because I've noticed they're just small sort of what we call Americanisms sort of entering into our language. Not things like dime a dozen because that's like very vocabulary based, but especially pronunciation. And I try very hard to fight against that a little bit. But just because of the influence of American TV and Hollywood and stuff, it's almost impossible to stop. It'll just keep going.
Yeah,
I do find
it's pretty astonishing. Go ahead.
No, it is sort of like just the influence that America is able to exert. So I'm trying to think of basic things like a really basic word like what you would call privacy. We say privacy.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I've heard that one.
Yeah, even though the adjective is pronounced the same way, we change the vowel sounds for the nouns. We go from private to privacy. Or something really basic like you would say on the weekend. But the original British English is at the weekend.
Oh, wow.
And it's really weird. Like, if I hear a foreigner say on the weekend, my brain just accepts it and carries on. If you would say it to me, I'm like, that's perfectly normal, no problem. But if I've got somebody who's got a very clear British accent say to me on the weekend, I kind of like, my brain bugs out a little bit. I'm like, whoa, what did you just say? This is not right. These words don't compute with this accent that you've got. So it's just funny. I've seen it just like slowly over time. I've got problems now too with words that I don't use very often. What's the one I was thinking? Oh yeah, this is a random aside, but I recently discovered one of my I don't know if this is something that was available in the States or maybe it was something that you were aware of when you were a kid, but there's these really old from the 1960s Super Marionation TV shows. They're basically puppets, but they're done in a way to make them look more human. And there's like the most famous one is a series called Thunderbirds, which is about this family who have an organization. If someone's in danger on the other side of the world, they'll send all their amazing equipment over and save them and stuff. And then there was another one called Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, which is basically about classic Earthlings, right? In 100 years in the future, so we're now thinking like 50 years in the future, or less, 2067, more or less. A human expedition to Mars, going there to investigate strange signals that they've been receiving, find an alien complex, and by mistake they destroy the complex, and the Martian race basically wants revenge against Earth, and every single episode the Martians threaten a certain person on Earth or whatever, and this group of special agents have to stop them. But in that show, there's a character who is, well, I guess you would say Lieutenant Green, but the version it's lieutenant, and the problem is now I cannot remember if the pronunciation should for a British person would be lieutenant or lieutenant. I think it's lieutenant. I don't know. It's so weird too because that show was made primarily for the American market, not the British market. So I'd find it really weird that they would include, if it is British, the British pronunciation of lieutenant. So it just my
Hmm.
brain just doesn't know anymore.
Yeah,
You
that
people,
is weird.
yeah, we could have a whole podcast just on British and American. I think we've got a little document that we share between us, and I've written it like two countries, um, separated by a common language.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember we talked about just going back and forth on British and American English differences. And yeah, I think for sure we could get a whole episode out of that.
It's just yeah, and then yeah, so especially there we were talking about like pronunciation on top of that, and vocabulary choices too, and yeah, just there's gonna be so much stuff from that. How do we go on to that? Oh yeah, translation board, of course. Yes, yeah. I've screenshotted a couple of things from that translation board episode. So yeah, a ten a penny, because I was like, this is very weird. I've never heard this expression. I haven't done any follow up to it because I only saw it yesterday. What was the other thing that I? Oh right, such a random question. I'm not going to mention it. So, is in the section where you were talking about how in Japanese it is more common to describe things with quotations. Whereas in
Yes.
English, we normally don't do that. And you made the example of in English, the dog is barking, but in Japanese, it would be the dog is barking, bow wow.
Right. Yeah.
And then you actually said it in Japanese. It was so cool to listen
That's
to.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I was going to say, this is such a random question, but I'm sure there's a point to this because we were talking about when you went to Japan, right?
Hmm.
How similar are animal noises in Japanese to English?
Oh, they're so different. They are
'Cause-
so different. I used to teach classes on how different the animal sounds are. Like, because I was working in elementary and middle schools
Okay,
as
cool.
part of the nature of my placement. So when I first went to Japan, uh, there was no formal like educational spot for English. It was just like a general subject that you could teach kids. And as like while I was there, they changed the system so that starting in fifth and sixth grade, there became a formal curriculum for teaching students English. But it used to be when I first got there, I could see any grade level in the elementary school, and it would just be a general purpose lesson about let's have fun with English. And actually, even when they made the curriculum for the fifth and sixth graders, the sort of educational goals were very strongly aligned with let's just sort of have fun with English
Mhm.
because we want the kids to have a positive feeling when they hear English. So when we hit them with all the grammar in middle school, they'll have something to fall back on, I guess. That last part's just me speculating, but the first part's very much like a real educational goal. We just want the kids to have fun with English.
Mhm.
And so one of the ways that, especially when I was doing like first and second grade lessons in Japan, the really little kids, and they'd be learning the animal sounds in Japanese. So it was the perfect excuse to be like, okay, let's go and talk about how different all the animal sounds are in Japanese, and they're so different. Like so to start with the dog, right? Like in Japanese, it's wan wan instead of bow wow, and I think there's another one that's like escaping me off the top of my head, but there's another barking sound that's also completely different. Um,
So maybe
Go
I'm maybe
ahead.
going to be ignorant here. I'm going to potentially embarrass myself here in front of everybody, but I've never heard the sound of a dog being described as bow wow in
Oh, really?
English. For me,
Oh,
it's always
maybe
been
that's another
it's
American thing. Go ahead.
it's always been woof woof woof, which I know is not very aggressive.
Maybe that's the other dog sound I was thinking of when I was thinking there was another one in Japanese. But yeah, you're right. I've also heard woof woof, but bow wow, like that's like stereotypical dog sound for me. That might be the American one. Like maybe there's a British and
Hmm.
American English dog sound difference. I don't know.
I assume
That's so
meow is
funny.
fairly universal.
Meow
Meow.
meow is not in Japanese. It's nya.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
cats say nya. And in fact, this actually gets very annoying because Japanese sounds like So like one of the ways you can think to yourself in Japanese is to say na. Like it's sort of like this reflective way of like I don't know, indicating that you're thinking about something, usually
Would it
to
be the
yourself.
would it be the Japanese equivalent of hmm?
Yeah, it's sort of like that. So yeah, so the first expression that's coming to my mind is so kana. Like, do you really think so? Right? Like, is that really what it is? And the na at the very end of that is indicating, yeah, I'm thinking, kind of like doesn't always work. Wouldn't always work as a translation, but it's the same sort of idea,
Oh,
right? You're making a
so it's not a filler sound. It's actually you use it in a phrase then.
yes, yeah. It actually is used
Ah,
like it has meaning. Yeah, that's
wow.
another
Okay.
thing. Japanese will often use like na isn't necessarily this, but it will use onomatopoeic sounds, sort of like those quotations I was talking about, all over the place in England in ways that English doesn't. So you can describe the level at which like rain is falling with different sound effects in Japanese. So za is for like really harsh, consistent rain. Um, I think it gets even more intense, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Um, but then you could also get. I'm so bad with Japanese sound effects. I think I'm gonna say it wrong. Pada pada. They all sound the same to me. Is the problem?
Hmm.
Let me try and look this one up. But there's like if it's just like a gentler rain, right? You can use another sound,
Oh
and
wow.
it'll be a different rain sound. Oh, I got it
Oh,
right.
that's
Pada pada.
oh
Yeah.
wow. Because like
It's
in English we have onomatopoeic sounds too, but it's more for like explosive things like bang, for example. Like that's
right.
like the most classic one, right? Or crash or something. Like you can hear that sound, but yeah, for rain, yeah, things like weather. Yeah, in Scotland we have a lot of words for rain, but none of them are onomatopoeic. They're more sort of metaphoric or like image based, like bucketing it down and chucking it down and pissing it
Oh
down if you
wow.
want to be a little bit, or pishing if you want to do it in the more Scottish way of doing it, pishing it down. So yeah, I found that really funny because
Interesting.
I had the same problem when I came here, and stupid conversations with my wife as you do. Because that's the thing, like it's again something we didn't discuss in the previous episode, but when you meet somebody who's not from your direct culture, from a different country, there's a lot of like experience. Like how do I explain this in an easy way? If you meet somebody from the same country as you, in theory, most times you'd have the same upbringing, so you have the same cultural experiences. So there's maybe a lot of things that maybe you both, you might make a reference to something, and your partner will instantly know what you're talking about because that's something that they watched during their childhood or whatever. But then
Yep.
the flip side is that if you meet somebody who's not from another country, you can basically ask them any sort of like childish question because it'll be potentially a brand new experience from you. So like we ended up getting onto a stupid conversation about animal noises. And
Yeah.
then I'm not joking, like us legitimately arguing about what sound a rooster makes. Because it's so different between.
Kokekoko, by the way.
Say again?
Kokekoko. That's what a rooster
Oh,
says in Japanese.
that's nice. Yeah. I promise I've got it in French. Korikoku is in French and in
Oh
Spanish. I don't know if it's
wow.
the same. I don't know if in Catalan it's the same. In Spanish it's kikeriki,
Ah.
which obviously I know. This is gonna be really embarrassing now. What's the American?
Cockadoodle doo.
Yeah, same. And my wife cannot see it. She just is in such denial about. It's like that's not. And every time we hear a rooster, I'm like, see, it makes the noise. She's just like, no.
I
It's
feel
worse.
like
It's worse when you write it. When you write it, it looks like you're writing utter gibberish.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like the rooster sound, right? The English has a very good way of getting the rhythm of it.
Yes, yes,
I
spot
don't
on.
think it's got like the doodle do, right? The D consonants. Like I don't hear that in the actual sound that a rooster makes. But it's
Hmm.
definitely cockadoodle doo is definitely the rhythm of a rooster's cry.
Right. Yeah. That's a good explanation. I haven't heard it that way, but yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. When French
Yeah.
is quite kori koku. I mean, yeah, kind of. It's hard trying to get the right sound, the number of syllables as well, right? Yeah. I
Yeah.
just saw that. It just made me laugh, and I just started thinking about that again. What was the other thing
Yeah.
that I? Oh, right. This is good. Right, okay, so the other thing I screenshot, because obviously it's another American English difference, quite a
Okay,
common
but
one.
before we move on to that, I do wanna finish the thought, right? Like
Go for it.
that in Japanese. So first of all, you were talking about how normally sound effects they're for things that are like explosions and things that make noise.
Hmm.
Japanese will have sound effects. I mean, everything I've used so far has been things that make noise, but it'll have sound effects. So like G is the sound for silence. Like if you're staring at someone and the room is utterly silent and it's the sound of you staring at that person, that is the sound. That it's G. And you can actually say like G or jiro jiro. Either way, it's another sound effect for the similar thing. Jiro jiro to miru is like to like stare at something like you're doing bug eyes or something, right? And they express that with a sound effect. And there's the difference that I was talking about before with like amega para para to futte kita as opposed to amega za to futte kita, where the para para is like a lighter, more sporadic rain, and the za is like a continuous downpour. And that's just normal, right? So they just throw in those quotes and those onomatopoeic words all over the place. And you'd sound very strange if you tried to replicate that in English. And I was also saying at some point about the cats, right? I was talking about um, the sound of thinking of na. They'll flip the na for nya, and there are a couple other ways that they can put it in. And because it's sort of a particle that you can just throw in, particularly that like contemplative na sort of sound, because you can sort of throw that in almost wherever. You get a lot of characters in Japanese properties who, if they're like a cat person, if they're a cat boy or a cat girl, they'll say nya all the time. And you have to try and come up with like similar phrases in my line of work. So you have to do all these like perfect or
Oh,
let's go
yeah,
right meow, right? All those puns, all those
yeah.
sorts of things. You have to like, how do I like recreate the weirdness of how Japanese is working the nya cat sound into the regular Japanese word?
Oh my
And I
goodness.
feel like it's so much easier to do that in Japanese than it is in English. So every time I get a character who talks like that, I'm just like, oh, here we go again.
That's amazing. So, John, that just blew my mind. So, the Japanese have a sound for staring in silence. That's incredible.
Yes. It's
I mean,
unbelievable.
especially like I know there are languages that I mean, like every language will have words of for concepts that do not exist. So the most
Hmm.
classic one that's in English, we use the German word because the German word doesn't exist in English. Is I don't know if you know it, Schadenfreude.
Oh yeah.
For
Yeah,
people who
taking
don't,
pleasure in someone else's pain. Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, funny enough, the Germans are gonna have a lot of emotion of Schadenfreude tonight. The fact they're beating Scotland, I think 4 or 5-0. Football, by the way, soccer. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, but and then also then colors might be seen differently. Numbers are a pain in the neck in terms of like I remember learning French back in high school days, and the way
Yeah.
they would say 80 is 420 and all this sort of stuff. You're just like, what?
Hmm.
So I mean, those sort of things I can understand, but the fact that then you're going to like the next level of creating sound effects for something that doesn't even have a sound.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Something that sort of blew my mind along those lines. This is another complete tangent. Maybe we won't even get to our main topic. But
I don't
something
think it
that
will.
blew my mind along those like same lines in English that we do for like subbing in a concept where it doesn't quite exist is the purely grammatical it, right? So when I say it's raining,
Mm-hmm.
what's actually raining?
Ah, well, sure. I guess it means the weather, I suppose. That's the only thing I can think of. That would be like the
Right,
replica for it. But you never say the weather is raining. It's just
right.
it.
The
You'd always
weather
do it with the
itself is
pronoun.
not a thing that's raining. You have to have a subject there in English grammatically,
Yeah.
but that subject doesn't actually stand for anything. It's
No.
just there because you need a subject in an English sentence. So you say, it is raining.
Mhm.
The rain is raining, right? Like, I guess that would be the closest thing.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I thought that was crazy. I was like, you're right. Wow, English, we need a subject.
Yeah. Whereas then I don't know how it works in Japanese, but in Spanish and Catalan, you don't need subjects.
Oh, yeah.
Spanish,
Japanese, they'll drop the subjects all the time. Go ahead.
Yeah, Spanish and Catalan is exactly the same. You only do it if the noun has to be explicit. If you're saying literally like the table or the cup or whatever. But if you know it from context, or if you're talking about, if I'm talking about myself,
Hmm.
I don't have to say yo like I would do in
That's
Spanish. I can just say the
it's
verb.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
so
don't know
my
about just the verb, but you almost always drop I in Japanese. Not all,
right.
I guess I shouldn't say almost always, but it's super common.
So
You'll
my
usually start with it and then you'll drop it or something like that. Go ahead.
okay. So my question would be to you then, because I've got the same problem. When you were learning Japanese, did you find it hard to drop the subject?
Yes.
Okay, same.
Yeah. Super hard.
Yeah,
Super hard. Not just like there's a lot of just implied stuff in Japanese where it's not just the subjects even. And it's kind of funny because Japanese also has like a billion different words for I. Uh so it's weird
what?
that they drop it so much. Yeah, like the different shades of like how you consider yourself like in terms of your identity come out in the word I, right? So there's like a traditional for, I think. The ore is like a very strong masculine version of I. Boku is like a typical masculine version of I. Watashi is neutral, slightly feminine. Atashi is more feminine, like, and those are the typical four. But you've also got like oira and atai and wagahai and like there's probably a whole bunch more that I can't think of off the top of my head. They just keep coming at like I thought at one point that I had learned them all, and then I saw another one, and it was just like, oh, here's another variation of I. Here we go. It's super
S-
confusing. So
So you
in Japanese, you not only have to think about like whether or not you're going to drop the I when you're making a sentence, you also have to think about with which version of the word I you're going to identify.
wow. So are you telling me then good grief. So but why do so many I so then I'm trying to process that information. Good grief, because it's just only
Yeah.
one word I. But then because then immediately my gut feeling is then does Japanese not view people in like a binary state then? If you're saying that you've got like this basically like almost like spectrum of like from heavy like strong masculine all the way to then strong feminine. Does it give more variety for people to identify themselves then?
I mean, it clearly does in terms of the variations of the word I.
Right.
Um, yeah.
But not from
Uh,
a legal perspective, but just purely from an like a linguistic perspective.
yeah, not from a legal perspective. It's all like social cultural, right?
Okay. So
Occasionally you'll get these things where like so for example, I always use watashi in Japanese because it's fairly neutral. It leans a little bit feminine, but it's also somewhat polite. And I tend to err on the side of, and that's what you learn. Like when you go to take a Japanese class, they'll probably teach you watashi because it's somewhat polite and it's neutral and it's easy to wrap your head around. But like you can go online and you can see these threads from people in Japan, and like I saw this on Twitter back when it was still Twitter, I think, of this Japanese woman who went online and was like, I don't know the full context of this because it was Twitter, but she was talking about how in her mind, people who use watashi are like very nerdy guys and a certain type of girl. Like she's got an image in her head of the sort of person who identifies as watashi, and people would like post their pictures and be like, I use watashi, and she'd be like, wrong. I use watashi. Okay, you actually look the part. I use watashi. I don't think you don't match the watashi type, right?
whoa.
It
But
was
then so then what happens then if you identify with a certain type of I, but then society says no, you're not that type of I?
no, you're in trouble.
Oh, you're in.
Yeah, there
Goodness
are a
me.
lot of yeah, there are a lot of there was a lot of hate towards I think they called them bokuko or something like that in Japanese. Girls who would use the boku, right? Remember I said the sort of softer masculine was boku.
Yeah.
Um, there was like this trend where all these girls were referring to themselves using the term boku, and it got a lot of backlash from people who were like, girls shouldn't be using that word. Like, stop it.
Wow.
Girls will also refer to themselves in the third person. Either gender can do it. You can refer to yourself in the third person, and it's much more normal than in English. In English, you sound super conceited. In Japanese, it's actually you tend to sound a little bit kiddie. Uh, but
Wow.
yeah,
So wait, so when you say it's like in the third person, like if I literally call myself by my own name, or I said the word one?
no, like you use your own name.
Okay, yeah. Scott Sword is drinking tea. Scott
That's
Sword is
right.
pondering everything that Rukimania's just said.
That's right. And in Japanese, there are people who refer to themselves that way, right? It's sort of like another version of I, and it comes off as somewhat childish and maybe a little bit cutesy,
Goodness me.
because I think it's largely more associated with girls and children than it is with guys and adults. But
Oh.
these are all fuzzy. These are all fuzzy sort of boundaries. There was a movie that came out. This is going to be super old now. It's called Your Name. It's like one of the biggest anime movies to come out in the past decade. I'm gonna just hedge my bets and say that. I don't know exactly when it came out. I don't remember. Uh, but there was this scene where if you watch the subtitle version, I don't know what they did in the dub because I never go see the dubs. I always watch it subtitled. And so I went to the subtitled version, and they had this scene where part of the plot of the movie is there's this guy and this girl, and they switch bodies at like random, and they don't really know what's going on. And so towards the start of the movie, the girl has switched into the guy's body, and she's talking with some of his friends, and she uses Atashi to be like I. And so the subtitles just put I feminine, and then the friends give her this like blank stare, and then she goes, "Oh, I mean ore," and then it goes I masculine, and her friends also like this guy's friends. The girl is the character who's inhabiting the body. The friends are all like, "Huh?" They're still like giving her nothing, and then she settles on Boku, which I think is the right answer. There might be more steps in it than that, but it's something like that. And literally, the subtitle is just like I feminine, I masculine, I whatever. And I was like, wow, like I do not envy them. I do not
Good.
envy them having to translate that scene.
What about making it complicated? Goodness me. That's just
Yeah. Yeah. I
wow.
remember I remember thinking about this because I seriously thought about this because I'm a professional translator. I was like, this could happen to me.
Hmm.
What would I do in this situation? And what I realized was in English, you can get a similar flavor of masculine, feminine, like group identification sort of thing going with the version that you use for you, right? So she could come in and be like, all right, my gals, right? Or, my gal
Ah,
pals, something. I don't know what a supernatural version of that would be, but she could say that and be overly feminine. And they'd be
right.
like, what are you talking about? And she'd be like, sorry, let's go, bros,
Yeah,
my
sure.
dudes,
Yeah.
guys, let's go.
Yeah, guys is quite safe, even though technically guy on its own is a man. But yeah, for some reason, guys can kind of work. Yeah, for both. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I had a quick look for the film. It was 2016, so you were right to say in the last decade. Very good.
Thank goodness.
There'll be no embarrassing comments talking about that. Oh god, I've got so many things I had to talk about. Because the other issue, then, I don't know. I'm gonna guess yes, but I'll see what your answer is. In Japanese, is there distinction if you're talking to somebody else? Um, is there like an informal you and a formal version of you? So if you're talking to a younger person of your generation or an elder, would you use a different word for you to show
Yes,
politeness
yes.
or respect?
Japanese is very concerned about politeness. Like it's baked into
Hmm.
the language. The way that you conjugate verbs, right? In a lot of languages, as I understand it, in Europe, like the what determines conjugation is a lot to do with like like I, you, he, she, they, right?
Yeah,
That sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. The
In
subject, sure.
Japanese,
Yeah, the pronoun.
in
Yeah.
Japanese, you have past tense and you have what I learned as non-past tense, which is just everything else. Those are the two like tenses of conjugation. And there's none of that like you he, she, it, or what have you, right? It's all but what you do get is 1,000 different degrees of formality, right?
Oh
So
my goodness.
you'll just use a different verb sometimes if you're talking about like so quick example, right? Iku is to go, right? Ikimasu, like let's go. Um, iko, let's go, is more informal as opposed to ikimashou, which is another let's go, but that one's more formal. And then if you get super polite, that changes to irasharu.
Oh, goodness me.
It's just a completely different verb. And there are a whole bunch of different verbs that are like that, and it's a total nightmare. Like they have words for being polite to other people, and then they have other versions for being like self-deprecating for yourself, and you have to
Uh,
always be thinking about the relational status between you and the other person that you're talking to.
I just wouldn't bother socializing if that was the case. That sounds like a lot of hard work.
It's a huge amount of hard work, especially when you factor in all the other like contextual implications that you're going on with Japanese. Sort of, it's one thing about spoken Japanese that I don't miss. I was talking in the last podcast that my spoken Japanese is super rusty. Like one thing I really don't miss is having to worry about keigo and kenjogo, which is like the honorific versus the humble language and that sort of thing. That's
It's hard enough for me.
that's
It's hard enough for me in Spanish to remember all the verb conjugations, let alone if I'm being formal or informal or whatever, right? At least in
yeah.
Japanese, if you get really fluent, you know where you stand with somebody. If the way they talk to you, you know if they're trying to disrespect you or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think like in most European languages, you've got this. Well, at least in Latin-based languages, you've got this distinction between an informal you and a formal you. So in Spanish, it's
Mm-hmm.
tu for you, informal, and then
Mm-hmm.
usted is the formal. Um, so then, yeah, in certain situations you have to maybe use it, but I've even seen it here, like, who are you going to use usted with? Maybe with people of, like, authority, maybe, I'm already getting into my head when I do my driving test in a few weeks, but by the time this podcast comes out, I probably would have already done it. YouTube. I would have to use usted with the examiner. He'll probably use usted with me. But then I've had it too, where going out with my wife or whoever. I use the word, or my wife will use the word usted, and the person will be like, "Don't use usted." They're
Mm.
just like they get offended that you've called them usted. It's so weird. But then flip side, if you go to Latin America, they're all about like Southern America. Like Argentina and Mexico and and Peru. They're all about the usted. They love usted.
Huh.
So it's just funny how there's like that cultural difference where it changes. Whereas in English, you don't have that. It's just you. And it's just all in terms of.
Right.
I've had to try to explain it to people who then try to speak in English to me. It's like, it's not about the word, it's about the tone. The way
Mm.
you form the sentences, you might use a more formal or more polite modal verb or whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to ask for permission, you're more likely to use the word may rather than can, but the you is
Mm-hmm.
still the same. It's just also then the way you approach them and the way you hold your body and all this sort of thing that you don't have to worry about changing this word.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. Languages, they're so fun. They're so fun. You learn so
They really
much
are.
about culture as well, because culture and language is so ingrained with each other, right? It's just
Yes.
you can't disconnect the two things. That's why I feel like a lot of English. Oh, but I was gonna say English. That's not true. A lot of language teaching does not
Mm-hmm.
take culture into account, and I think
Mm.
it doesn't matter if it's in high school and private academies or whatever it is. I feel like there should be parts of these textbooks and part of the curriculum which should be be based on culture, because it is
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
connected. Once you
strongly
understand
agree.
culture, you can understand language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're absolutely intertwined. It's astonishing. Just you learn so much about the way that the people of a certain culture will think about things once you just learn their language. And sort of vice versa. When you learn about how certain people in a culture think about things, you can have a leg up when you're learning the language.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. The other last thing, very, very quick point. I don't think we'll be on this too long, but it's just another American British English difference. But it was the part where you had like the table where you had all the different for people who haven't watched Translation Born, go and watch it first of all. And secondly, it was the analysis of a collection of garments that these hunter characters can wear, and you were
Oh yeah.
analyzing the descriptions of them and things. So the one in the bottom of the table where you've got old hunter trousers, you've
Yeah.
then put the official English translation as old hunter trousers, but then when you
Yep.
wrote the English literal, you wrote pants of an old hunter.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how hard, like, the kind of mental gymnastics and having to try and balance the word trousers and pants, that must
Yeah. Well, I'm also because I am a completionist, and for years I did this series, and in a lot of ways, the story of Translation Born is me giving in more and more to my completionist impulses. So what I started to do just recently, actually, I feel like this was only a few episodes ago. It's probably a little bit more than that. I've probably been doing it longer than I realize. But fairly recently, I started to leave pinned comments under the episodes.
Mm.
And in those, I can talk about things that I don't actually have time to get to in the episode itself. And because I'm always short, there's always something else that I want to talk about. And for years, I would do the episodes and be like, well, I really wanted to get to that. I think it's an interesting point, but I don't think it's as interesting as the point that I really wanted to focus on. So I guess I have to be selective about what actually makes the episode. And I finally was like, okay, I'm just going to leave a really long comment under every episode now, or I can talk about whatever I want. And people can read that or they can not read that. One of the things I left in the pinned comment for Translation Born 83, which is the current one that we've been talking about, is exactly on that. So in American English, I know that trousers versus pants is an American English versus British English difference. So when I give my quote unquote literal translations, I give them based off of what I would write for my literal translation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm super incredibly literal. Like, it depends on how much I want to make a point. Sometimes I'm deliberately choosing things that I know sound weird, but they'll serve the point that I want to make later. And actually, there are some episodes where I make weird choices so that I can make a certain point, and then it's one of the episodes before I left pinned comments, so I don't even make the point, and it just sounds super weird. But now I have the advantage of being able to sort of expound a little bit more. And I don't think I went to great detail in that particular point. I think I just said Old Hunter Pants is one of the few places where, even though I'm an American English speaker and pants doesn't sound weird to me in place of trousers, and it's a UK based translation team. Frog Nation is based. Their English language team is based out of the UK, from what I understand. So they tend to use a lot of British English. And in the process of writing all these translations, I'm sure that they would have defaulted to trousers. So I could have put trousers for my literal translation. I deliberately put pants because I thought it was funny. Because it's one of the few translations where, even though as an American, pants of I'm trying to think of another armor set and totally blanking right now. So like Gascoigne's pants. Pants of the Old Hunter Gascoigne, right? That doesn't sound weird to me. But Old Hunter Pants, something about that sounds funny even to my ear. And so I wanted to point that out. I was like, listen, if you're telling me to put on my Old Hunter Pants, that just sounds silly to me. I'm sorry. So this is one of the few cases where, even as an American English speaker, I think I'd be inclined to go with the trousers translation just to avoid that silliness.
But you put it in anyway.
I put it in anyway. Like I said, I wanted to make a point. I wanted
comic relief.
I wanted people to read that and think, oh, Old Hunter Pants, that sounds weird, that sounds silly. And then have the same sort of reaction that I did. Maybe we should change that. There's another word for pants that we can go to. It's trousers, right? So there's a lot of that where I think one thing is very easy to do when you're thinking about translation is to think, oh, it's easy. You know the word in one language, you know the word in the other language, you just sub in one for the other. And that's not how it works at all.
Yeah.
So a huge amount of the effort that I put into these episodes ends up going to show all the many different ways that sort of thinking doesn't apply. You cannot rely on a literal translation to get all of the meaning across.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
to go back to the whole like 10 a penny thing, that was a case where I got to use it as an example of, so they've baked in the basic idea in the Japanese. It didn't use an idiomatic expression for like hunters were common. It just said back in the day hunters were common, right? I forget exactly what my super literal version was, but it was like back in an era when many hunters hunted beasts.
Yeah.
And it was a sort of embellishment on the part of the English translators to write back in the days when hunters were 10 a penny. And I was like, this is better than the Japanese because you get all these extra implications that are in line with the themes in the story that are crucial for this game and the particular circumstances of this set of items. but you haven't really changed the core meaning because tenpenny as an idiomatic expression is meant to get across the idea that these are common, right?
Sure.
So you get the base meaning plus something else. So I get to even fight against the idea that you always have to lose something in translation, which, don't get me wrong, you very often are losing something in translation, but you don't have to lose something all the time. And so I like to call out these little moments where I was like, this is really clever. The translators have found a way to add in more thematic information while conveying the base idea. So that's the sort of thing I try to go for.
Sure, I can imagine it being the other way around, where you might be, I don't know how much is used in Japanese, but, or in Bloodborne in particular, but there might be then Japanese expressions or Japanese idioms when then the when they're translating into English, then they're going, how do we translate this? This concept doesn't exist in English. If we try to do it literally, it will sound really inconcise or unconcise. Inconcise, I don't know what that negative adjective is. It would sound really long-winded. We can't do this. We're going to have to find another way of cutting this down, and then you might then lose something from it. It just depends. You can't do it literal all the time. It just depends. I've got the same problem when I'm doing Spanish classes. The number of
Mm-hmm.
times I'll write something and again, especially it depends on what the topic is, but if my English brain starts kicking in and I start not translating literally, but I will be using my English brain to sort of form sentences, my teacher will look at it and go, the Spanish is correct, but it doesn't sound Spanish. And that's kind of
Yeah.
what you're getting at here. It's like, yeah, it's Japanese or it's English words, but it doesn't really sound right. There's something weird about it. This combination of words as well, or the word order sounds strange, or I would use a synonym here or whatever. It's kind of worms, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a certain version of every foreign language that's like that foreign language filtered through the brain of someone who's learning it as a foreign language,
Yeah.
right? Uh, there was a manga that came out. This was a long time ago now, but it was the story of this teacher who taught students who knew English, and they were mostly English. Not, I think some of them were from other countries, but it was mostly English-speaking students at this school in Japan, trying to teach them Japanese. And she would put in all these little stories of interactions people would have. And there was this one really funny thing, like one really funny part of this comic, where one of the students who was learning Japanese had to go to the hospital for some reason. And the doctor called the teacher in to be like, oh, we need someone to translate. And he would ask a question in Japanese. And then the Japanese teacher would ask that same question in foreign friendly Japanese. And the foreigner would answer in foreign friendly Japanese. And the doctor was immediately like, oh, this person speaks Japanese. Let me just ask them directly all these questions. And he could not communicate with the student at all because he didn't know the like international version of Japanese that this Japanese language teacher was using to actually communicate in Japanese. It was really interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, as I said, can of worms.
Yeah.
Learning a language is not easy, folks.
No, and it never
Uh,
ends.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's just an ongoing journey. You always discover stuff. I mean, even with English, I'm discovering stuff that I don't know anymore, or I didn't know before, and yeah. Especially I'm finding in Spanish because the way I often view Spanish is a formal version of English because obviously Spanish being very much Latin based, and English has this kind of weird mixture of Anglo-Saxon Latin, so weave together. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
words which are very formal in English come from the Latin side. So a lot of the time, if I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of a word in Spanish, I'll just think of the formal English word and then translate it in terms of pronunciation and spelling, and it kind of works most of the time. It's very interesting. So yeah. But then there'll be
That's
words that I don't know. When I see the word in Spanish, I look at it in English, it gives me the same word back, and I'm just like, I don't know what that word even means.
oh yeah, that's funny. That
Nightmare.
reminds me, and this might be a way that we can transition into sort of one of our topics, or at least something that someone had asked us about. That I remember you putting on the sort of general idea of things to talk about. But one of the things that I noticed living in Japan was they have all this seafood. I talked about that last time.
You did.
And so I learned a bunch of these words for fish in Japanese, and I had no idea what the fish were in English. Like I'd
Mm.
look them up, and the dictionary would give me an English word, and I'd be like, that means nothing to me.
I've got the same issue here with cuts of meat.
Oh yeah, I bet.
My brain cannot connect the or even fish too. I mean, because food is really hard because there's not many common words for a lot of basic foods. And then
Right.
even then you look at, Japan and America, completely different part of the world. I mean, okay, I know you got the Pacific coast of the US, but you're so far away. But even in between Spain and Scotland, there's not a lot of common food vocabulary. And then with fish and cuts of meat, I would be like the number of times too where my wife knows the translation, and I'll see something on a menu. I'm like, "What's that in English?" Then she tells me, and I'll be like, "What's that?" What's that?
It's like it didn't help at all. I'll give you an example. When I first went to Japan, they have in convenience stores. It's very common for them to carry this specific type of pasta, which
Okay.
I didn't know what it was. It was like long strands of spaghetti, and there was
Right.
like this red sauce mixed with butter, and I loved it. And I couldn't read Japanese at the time because this was like the first time I went to stay in Japan when I was in college and I was on a study abroad program. So I had no idea how to read the kanji that was on the packet. So all I knew was, oh, it was this red stuff with butter that you put in the spaghetti and it tastes delicious. And I found out later that the Japanese is mentaiko. And when I looked that up, because eventually I got curious, like, what is this stuff that I'm eating that I like so much? And turns out it's walleye pollock roe. And that did not help me at all. The only thing that told me was that it was a type of roe. But I couldn't tell you what the walleye pollock is.
Well, you're saying that's really funny. I only know walleye from Stardew, and
Oh, it's in Stardew.
yeah, it's a fish that you can catch, and
Look at
pollock.
that topical reference. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, there we go. We connected to the footage. Let's go. And then pollock, I know because in the UK we sometimes eat pollock, like in fish and chips and stuff.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
but the roe bit, don't. I haven't got a clue.
Oh, that's so funny. We're like total opposites because that's the only part I understood. That just
Wow.
means fish eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna be constantly battling with food. It's just, yeah, this.
Yeah, and they put that on pizza, which was one of the sort of follow-up questions I saw that you had noted, which was,
Yeah.
are there any sort of unusual pizza toppings in Japan that like I've got strong opinions on? I mean, the nature of my response in the last episode was sort of accept each thing for what it is and
Mm.
don't try and recreate like what your expectation from your culture is of a certain food in that other culture, right? So learn to love the corn and mayo on pizza as opposed to just rejecting it as not pizza. Um,
So
that's
that
sort
was
of
I
go
know
ahead.
you said that in the last podcast, but I must admit I was quite tired that day, and I don't think I quite processed what it was you said. It was only then when somebody commented and said, "I'm not going to eat the mayo and corn on pizza." I was like, "Wait, did Rook actually say that?" I listened back to the whole podcast. I was like, "Oh, you actually did." For me, like, yeah,
Yeah,
the idea of having mayonnaise on pizza just doesn't sit well with me at all. The corn bit, I don't. I mean, when you say corn, I assume you mean sweet corn. I assume that's what we're talking about.
yes,
Okay, that's
yeah,
all right then.
like
Okay.
canned kernels of sweet corn. Yeah,
Right, okay, okay, that I'm on board with. That I can go with. Mayo, and with
yeah.
mayo and corn together, that doesn't sit well in my brain. That doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
They
you've
put
had it.
mayo. They put mayo on like everything.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not everything, literally everything. I'm like, it's very common to just drizzle mayo over a pizza in Japan. So
okay,
yeah,
but
I've had
but
it
but
frequently. Go
Japanese
ahead.
mayo is different from what like Western mayo, quote unquote. I hate the word
Yes,
Western. European American mayo.
yes, it is different.
In what way?
I don't I don't know how it's different. I've heard that it's different. I know that you can buy the two and they're different, but I don't know the specifics of how it's different because mayo is one of those things that I only ever get at a restaurant. I don't cook with it myself.
Hmm. I saw a cooking channel on YouTube, Sorted Food, do some sushi, and they ended up, and one of the guys made Japanese mayo. And I'm not saying it was authentic Japanese mayo. Let me make that really clear. They were under time pressure doing a stupid format, so it could have easily
Hmm.
not been. But I think maybe they put, is it mirin? It's like a
They might
they might put
they
mirin,
put
whereas like at least the mayonnaise they make here, it would just be egg or egg yolk and olive oil, and that's it, or oil, and that's it.
Yeah, I was tempted to say that the Japanese mayo is a little bit sweeter, and if they use median, that makes sense because that's very sweet. It tends to lend things a very sweet flavor.
Oh, is that how they
So
pronounce it? Oh, good grief, I got that very wrong. I took it from the British video. Don't hurt me.
no, no, I don't care.
I have no idea. They said mirin. It's like I assume that's the right pronunciation. How do you say it?
Median,
Midi.
median.
Mirin. Okay, mirin.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So yeah, Japanese, like the vowel sounds are consistent. A, I, U, E,
Oh,
O. So
right.
whenever you see
My
an
goodness.
I in Japanese, it's always an E sound.
Right. And
So and
hence why
then
English people say it incorrectly. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and then the R, you do like a little bit of a flap off the top of your mouth, like the hard ridge at the back of your teeth there.
Uh-huh.
Um, so D. So you do me, D, mm.
Oh.
And it's very consistent, is my point.
That's a good. In Spanish is the same. If you don't know anything about Spanish, it's the same. All the vowels are the same. But then again, that's a real problem when English speakers try to learn it because they. I mean, this is the only linguistic bit of. I'm not a phonet. I didn't study phonetics. The only bit of phonetics I know is the schwa.
Oh, okay, yeah,
English people put the schwa in Spanish words, and I'm just like, you don't have to do that. That's not how the language works. Stop schwaring everything. It's so irritating. And even like, I mean, I've made jokes on stream when we're doing like Fury of Dracula stuff because you always got Iberia in the map, and you've got Granada and Santander, and
hmm
everyone's going Grenada and all this sort of thing.
hmm
I'm just like, oh my goodness, stop schwaring everything. Every A is the same. So yeah, that's something that when I was learning, I know I'm never gonna have the native accent in Spanish, but the
hmm
one thing I really try to take care of, and I get it wrong. I'm human. I'll make mistakes, especially in the heat of the moment. I'm trying to speak quickly, but I try so hard to pronunciate the vowels well and
mm.
get that rhythm and just make sure that every A is pronounced the same, every E is pronounced the same way, and every I and so on. Because yeah, it's I find it very cringy to try to listen to then English people trying to speak Spanish and they're schwaring like every single vowel and change the pronunciation. I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. There
Yeah.
is there is something I will agree. There is something that's very irritating. I try as much as possible not to judge anybody for their inability to pronounce Japanese like a Japanese speaker.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like I'm pretty good at that. Like I don't care if people say mirroring. But when someone like there would be people who would come in and they would give these speeches to the Japanese office, right? Because we'd be at our like welcoming party for these new ALTs who are coming in and they don't know any Japanese, and they get up there and they've worked so hard. They've worked so hard to come up with a script and uh, make everything work in Japanese, and they've usually collaborated with a teacher or someone, and they're up there and they start speaking, and it's almost not understandable. It's
Yeah.
it's just like on the verge of incomprehensibility, and I have to try so I well don't have to do this anymore, but I had to try so hard not to laugh because I was like, no, I know they worked really hard on this. I know they feel really bad, like they're self-conscious about their pronunciation. I don't want to make them feel bad for the effort they've put in this situation, but it's so cringy.
Mm.
It's
It's
like I
something.
can't even tell what they're trying to say.
Oh, that's awful. I know that's so. Yeah, that must be so difficult for the person, but then maybe they're not aware of it. But then the people who are having to listen are just like, oh my goodness. I think that's the thing. Like English is really tough, and I feel I will never ever like deliberately make fun of somebody for their English pronunciation, even native English speakers when they get things wrong, because the language is not very logical in terms of pronunciation. There's so many. If you haven't seen a word before, it's so easy. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about lieutenant. Why is there f sound in there? There's
Yeah,
no
where's the
F.
F come
What's
from?
it
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
We can hear. I mean, like privacy and privacy. Why does that suddenly change and all that sort of stuff? But especially when it's a language like that where there is such the language is either being constructed or the way that's evolved or they've got very set rules in terms of pronunciation. Just it was the first thing I did when I did Spanish beginner classes back in Edinburgh. It wasn't even before I came over here, even in Edinburgh, and I was with a native Spanish teacher, and they're like, first lesson, we're teaching you the alphabet. And we're gonna
Hmm.
get this drilled into you, and then we'll then we'll do something else. And they were like really good about it.
Hmm.
I forget sometimes. It's natural. Especially my big problem, maybe in Japanese not so much because the language is so different. But maybe you can correct me if that's not the case. But if it's a word that is very similar to an English word, my brain will just default read it in English, and then I will forget
Yes.
pronunciation rules, and I'll kind of doing this the weird we call it Spanglish way of
Hmm.
pronunciating it, and my teacher will just be like, "Read it again."
Yeah. So there actually is a lot of that in Japanese. There's these days they have this whole system of writing where they've got so there's sort of three or four different like common writing systems. There's in terms of what you think of as like Japanese writing, there's hiragana, which is like one set of ways that you write syllables, sort of. And then there's katakana, which is another set of like you see this, you pronounce it this way. Then there's kanji, which their pronunciation changes all the time. They're more sort of meaning based, and even they sometimes they even have multiple meanings. And there's something like I can't remember the exact number. They in Japanese you talk about the two syllabaries as if they're like as if they include 50 sounds, but the actual number is different. So I'm very tempted to say that there's 50, but there's not. I know there's not. I just don't know what the real number is. But um, so there's like a relatively constrained set of the hiragana and the katakana, and then of course there's thousands of kanji because it's all the like Chinese characters that they've
Hmm.
borrowed and made their own. But anything that's written in katakana these days, there is a very high chance that that's a foreign loanword of some kind. And
Ah.
of the foreign loanwords, I think it's something like 75%. Someone, when I was working on the JET program, actually looked this up. They looked up like the percentage of where each katakana word came from, because it's not all English. Like sometimes it's from German, sometimes it's from French, sometimes it's from other languages. But the vast majority, it was something like 75%, was it comes from English. And so it's very common for me to see a word in katakana, figure out what the English was that it was based off of, and then just think of it that way. And if I'm not careful, I'll catch myself like relying on the English to pronounce it in Japanese.
Hmm.
And it can get really awkward. And sometimes it doesn't even quite work. So the example that's springing to mind for me is there's Baskin Robbins, which I don't know if you know about in Europe, but it's a chain. It's an ice cream chain that started in the U.S. They're famous for having 31 different flavors of ice cream, and they're so famous for having 31 different flavors of ice cream that in Japan everybody calls it 31 ice, out of the ice being short for ice cream. So they don't even call it Baskin Robbins over there. And it's actually I think it's more common in Japan now than it is like still remaining in the States. But
Really?
I think so. Because I don't know that many Baskin Robbins that are around me where I live in the States, and they're everywhere in Japan. They're not hard to find.
Wow.
Um, so, but they've got these 31 flavors, and then they've got this like rotating menu of more seasonal ice cream. And because they started in the US, a lot of the like sort of fun names that they give their ice cream flavors are based off of US English pronunciation. So one super like generic example is very berry strawberry. And
Right.
in Japanese, they don't have that v sound. So they just say berry berry strawberry. And it doesn't even work. So
No.
I look at the katakana for berry berry strawberry and I'm like, that's very berry strawberry. How am I going to order that? Can I have a scoop of your very berry strawberry? Like I just want to say it in English.
Yeah,
And then I'm
sure.
like, no, I can't do that. I have to say it wrong. I have to say it in katakana.
Wow. That's amazing. It sounds so cute in Japanese, though.
It does.
Yeah. I think I've added it to the list already. I think we're gonna have to do a an episode on loan words because again I've got like an ongoing battle with English loan words in Spanish and the way
Oh
that they are
wow.
used incorrectly. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one.
Oh, for sure.
So very good. Somehow we've covered absolutely nothing from our document, and we're over halfway through the podcast. Excellent work. we haven't
I
even got
swear, we just
we haven't got to follow up yet.
no, we just get together and talk about stuff that interests us, and that's
Oh, that's
that's what these
amazing.
conversations really are. Forget the structure.
Yeah, we'll be up to episode 100. We still haven't finished the whole living in Japan and Spain bit.
That's right.
I should probably say to people watching, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, well done. I want to say very quickly, obviously, yeah, it's been we're recording this 6 days after the previous podcast come out. I know it was about 3 weeks ago by the time it goes out on YouTube. Huge thank you to everybody who was tuning in. The number of views was ridiculous. I know the retention figures weren't extremely high, so I'm not saying that 500 people watched all 2 hours, but it was it was great to see so many people. And thank you to everybody for all the comments as well. It was really nice to see. I don't know about you, Rick, but I got people messaging me on Discord as well to say that they enjoyed it. And also there were
Oh,
lots
that's
of comments
great.
on the video, which was really nice. And some people who hadn't seen before, so maybe they were subscribers of yours, or people who just discovered the video randomly. Maybe there were quite a few Stardew Valley fans who tuned in and then suddenly realized, oh god, it's just a noob, and they're just talking, so they tuned off immediately. But if you notice by the title of the video, there's nothing in the video title that says Stardew Valley. It's only when I say what game I'm playing, I tag it as Stardew Valley. There's nothing in the video title to say it. So I'm not trying to say to people, this is a Stardew Valley video. No, it's not. It's just there purely as background stuff. So yeah, thank you very much to everybody who's been tuning in and watching. It was really nice, and to see all the lovely comments. So one of the comments that we did have was partly because of the mayo and corn pizza. I wanted to add to that the thing here um, is a bit of a Spanish thing is to have carbonara sauce on pizza.
Oh yeah.
But with mushrooms, which is not really a thing. And then I tell all the Italians I bump into, oh yeah, by the way, do you know in Spain they have carbonara pizza? And then I watch them explode with rage. And I just keep telling my wife on almost a weekly basis that carbonara is a pasta sauce, not a pizza sauce. What are you doing? Stop destroying Italian culture. And also the other problem here is when I don't know what it's like in the States, but when you go to an Italian restaurant, you ask for carbonara, it will always be with cream, and again that makes me have an absolute tantrum.
That's funny.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's very similar in the States. Carbonara is definitely associated with cream, and I've had carbonara pizza in both Japan and the U.S.
Oh well, there you go then.
Yeah, a
So that's a thing.
worldwide phenomenon, just to make the Italians bad, I suppose.
Pretty much, yeah, sounds about right. They invented all the great food, and then we're gonna ruin it.
That's
So
right.
one of
I
the
didn't even get to the crazy. So I found these articles on the different sorts of pizza that you can get in Japan, and so
oh
on
let's dive into this.
this one subject, they're like talking about all the different ingredients before they even get to the mayo. They're like, okay, corn's an ingredient in the Domino's pizza is a very common pizza chain across the U.S. I don't know how popular it is in Europe, but they also have Domino's pizza in Japan.
Oh yeah,
And the
Domino's is
menus,
everywhere here. I think the thing
okay,
that they're mentioning in the article, Little Caesars, that's not a European thing. But Domino's, yeah, we got Domino's everywhere.
okay, yeah. So Domino's, they've got corn as an ingredient on the company's spicy mayo and mochi pizza. Mochi being the like rice cake that I think is most common for being put in like tea over here or something, or some other type of sweet, maybe frozen yogurt. I think you get mochi over here. I know Japanese. I know the Japanese version of mochi, and the U.S. version of mochi is very strange to me, but it's the same thing. So they put that on pizza. Then they've got the charcoal grilled chikiteri pizza, chikiteri for chicken teriyaki.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
and then they have the chef's vegetable special pizza, the shrimp mayonnaise pizza, uh, and all of those have corn on them as well. And then if you like scroll down, you can see that they've also got things like potato, seafood, super common. Is seafood weird for pizza? I feel like seafood isn't that weird for pizza.
I guess it depends what it is. If it's something like anchovies, then that's pretty. At least over here, that's pretty common. But I guess it depends on what it is. I'm trying to see that picture. I'm trying to work out what that even is. Uh,
Yeah.
was it
Um,
shrimp and crab and lobster and salmon? No. But
yeah,
here's the
it's probably the cod roe in the picture.
yeah.
It looks
Oh,
like roe.
there's the word row again. I've never seen this word row, and I've heard it twice in the last hour. Like, what is this?
Means fish eggs.
Uh, Isn't that again? Pardon my ignorance. Is that not caviar?
I think caviar is a specific type, but like salmon roe is the eggs of the salmon, and so
Oh,
the cod roe is the eggs of the cod.
oh. So row's like the generic word, and caviar is a very specific type. Oh.
That's my understanding. I'm confident about roe. I'm not confident about caviar.
Don't worry, somebody in the comments will let us know if we're wrong. It's fine. Yeah, so we already have
Absolutely.
anchovies. But that being said, though, I would say that fish on pizza is not very common. However, in the area of Catalonia where I live, there's a thing called coca de la capte, which is basically like pizza. It's like the easiest way to explain it. But the dough's not very thick. It's much thinner. And you
Hmm.
don't do a tomato base. It's just the dough, and then I think the traditional would be to have roasted strips. Oh, sorry, get that around the right way. Strips of roasted pepper and courgette and aubergine in like little stripes all along it. But then there are other flavors where, and I've had some recently where they've got little bits of cod on it, maybe a prawn. It just depends. So on that seems normal to me. But if I went to like an Italian restaurant or a pizzeria or something, and they were like, "Oh, would you like some salmon or cod on your pizza?" I'll be like, "No, that's not. That's not. I give me my margarita with a bit of basil, and that will do, thank you, or some anchovies and pesto or something. Not. I would have had anchovies and
Interesting.
pesto together. Made that clear. That was not the two flavors together.
Yeah.
um,
But yeah, apparently I've been Japanified in that sense because seafood pizza just seems like another option to me. Like, yeah, we'll put salmon. Like, if you want to be a little bit fancy, we'll give you some octopus, maybe some squid, right? Like, we'll just put that on the
hmm.
pizza. That seems totally normal to me. But it's always on the menu when I was ordering in Japan. It was always on the menu.
I,
Yep.
I've just scrolled down and I've just seen a combination of words that is an abomination to me. Further down that
It was,
that article, they're talking
yep.
about this pizza chain, Pizza La, if that's how you
Yep.
pronounce it.
Pizzada. Pizzada. Yeah.
Oh, Pizzala, okay.
Yep.
They have a fish and chips pizza. Now, as a Brit, I'm gonna use a Scottish phrase. That makes me boke. That just doesn't seem like that's just not right at all.
I've never heard of that one. So some of the things on this list that I found are stretches. I think it says under the Squid Ink pizza, for instance, like this is not a common experience, and that's true. I think to some extent this article was just sort of scrounged up to get like some like make a splash, right? Get
Right.
people's attention,
Kill the
and
clicks.
so even if they're not necessarily the common varieties of weird Japanese pizzas, they'll put out the like eye-popping like versions of Japan. I'm sure you can get a squid ink pizza in Japan. Like I said, when I'm from Hachinohe, they put squid ink in cookies. So I'm sure that I could have found a squid ink pizza in Hachinohe somewhere. But that's not normal. That's not like normally on the menu. Fish and chips pizza, that's not normally on the menu. I like that was news to me.
Oh my! And I've just seen the picture. It's even worse, and I'm really glad that Reddit has restored. It's from the link that's in that article is to a Reddit page called Casual UK, and I'm really glad that the top comment had the same reaction that I did. That it's not just fish and chip pizza. It's worse. It's fish and chip and lemon wedge pizza. There are literally lemon slices all over the pizza.
That sounds good. I love lemons.
It, so do I, but not with pizza. No, that's just not. No.
I bet I'd like it.
Oh my goodness. Oh no. I mean, this is probably how Italians feel when people cook carbonara pizza, but this is just
Yeah,
so
probably.
wrong. Oh no.
You just gotta wait for them to come for your cultural food. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that makes me. I mean, to be fair, I can't really complain because Scotland has created some abominations in terms of food. So, for people who don't know, because again, maybe in the States it's not really a thing, but there's a thing called the chippy. The chippy is the chip shop, the place where you go to buy fish and chips. But there are other. You don't just get fish and chips. You can get other stuff. You can get a sausage. We call it. It's at least I think at least that might be a Scottish thing. A sausage supper. So you get a battered
Hmm.
sausage and some chips. Fish supper, fish with your chips. But in Scotland they've created a deep fried pizza supper. So they'll literally take a slice of pizza, deep fry it, and then give that to you with your chips. If that sounds bad, there's one that's even worse. Do you know what a Mars bar is? I don't know if that's a thing that's in the
Yes.
States. Right.
Yes, I do. The candy bar.
So,
Yeah.
right, okay, so someone in Scotland thought it'd be a good idea to deep fry a Mars bar and serve that with chips.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
always,
I'm
it's always,
surprised these weren't invented in the US. We've got deep fried Oreos. We've got the like donut hamburger sandwich thing. Like it sounds like something that could be made in the States.
yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, Scotland is very much in competition with the US in terms of deep frying stuff. It's, yeah, we're very much on par with each other, I think.
Good to know.
It's always funny every time I saw Spanish people, because it's always like I got the picture of it with it cut open. I'm like, what do you think's inside? And they're like, meat. And I was like, no, guess again. Think of other brown foods. And it takes them at least 10 minutes to get to chocolate, because chocolate is not on their list of things that they're thinking of.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't guess that either.
Yeah, it's unreal. Yeah. I mean, this is gonna sound weird. I've never eaten it. I don't know if it's good or not. I don't like chocolate. I know that's probably a weird opinion to have, but I just don't like chocolate. We can get into that if we need to. But
Wow.
yes, I'm sane. I've been tested. It's okay. Yeah, it's yeah.
I took a class on chocolate when I was in college. We sort of used chocolate as a vehicle to explore like the world of commodity trading, and so we got like super in depth on different types of chocolate, the history of chocolate, how it was made, what the like stuff is like around the world, and because it was also fun, we would we'd show up every day and then they'd pass around a basket of some chocolate from somewhere around the world.
Yep.
But one of the things that we read in one of the books for that class was speculating that chocolate is one of the few things that you can take to any culture in the world and people will respond positively to it. So I'm super surprised to hear that you don't like chocolate.
I know I'm a bit of an outsider in that sense. I am not the norm. I want to make it clear. It's not like Scottish people don't like chocolate. Scottish people love chocolate. There's a lot of chocolate. But no, I'm just not. I'm not a fan. Oh, okay, so I should probably explain why now, because people are going to be like, ugh, why do you not like chocolate? That's so weird. Basically, when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with like mild ADHD. I guess it probably wasn't mild at the time, but it's like it didn't cause me like issues at school and stuff. But there are things now, as I've got a bit older, I've kind of realized like quite a lot of the time I'm not very good at sitting still and this sort of thing. I'm not like horrendous. I want to make this really clear. It's not extreme or anything. I can cope. But yeah, I feel we're having a conversation privately. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying talking to yourself is ADHD, but I like just walking around my flat very randomly and talking to myself when I'm trying to think of something, and that sort of stuff. And yeah,
I do that too.
I'm a bit fidgety.
I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I talk to myself all the time.
Comment down below if you also do that. Because also then we had somebody else in our chat say like, I never do that. And then it was funny the way it was strange. It was just the way he was like, I can't do that. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like you don't have permission or you don't have the ability. Like, what's going on?
Well, it's because if you watch his videos, right? Like, watch one of his Fury of Dracula videos as opposed to one of yours. It's how well can you externalize, can you verbalize your internal monologue? Is how I think of it. Where when I watch one of your videos, Scott Sword, I know why you're making every decision you're making. I know when you're thinking about making another decision or something like that, because you're talking about your thought process as you play. You may not verbalize every thought that you have, but you're generally talking out loud what you're thinking. Strider will start a video and be like, okay, I'm going to try and talk more, guys, because he wants to make a Scott Sword style video. And after 5-10 minutes, he'll just be quiet. And you'll see him like, if you follow his cursor around the screen, you can sort of reverse engineer his thought process. You can see what he's tempted to do because he'll like click on something and then not unclick it and then like find a way to cancel the click without selecting it because he's changed his mind. And some of the options he considers are truly terrifying to watch. and then he'll undo it at the last second and I'll just breathe a sigh of relief.
He can verbalize his thoughts when he gets angry, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's why I think he was saying, like, I put my reactions in, right? I don't put my thoughts, right? So you don't have that constant sort of stream of consciousness where he's thinking, maybe it's time to renewed vigor. No, I think I'd better save it for the next week. He'll just silently select renewed vigor and then deselect it, and then think about it for a little bit, and then close the dialogue prompt and move on with the next phase of the game.
Hmm.
So I think that's what he meant when he was like, I can't like talk to myself because he has that sort of trouble narrating or externalizing his internal monologue when he's playing these games.
Hmm. It's quite bad when I play board games in person because it feels like I'm agonizing over every single tiny decision because I verbalize everything. Anyway, so yeah, because I got diagnosed with this mild ADHD. I didn't mean medication for it; it's just mostly through diet. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
main things is like the amount of chemicals and through the with ultra processed food and e numbers and all this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents used to have this little book of like with all the different e numbers. I guess now I don't know if they're still called e numbers or they're called something different now. And a lot of highly processed food was removed from my diet, and a lot of that would be also a lot of chocolate bars and
Mm-hmm.
candies and sweets and goodness what else, right? So I never really developed a really sweet tooth. Even now,
Mm-hmm.
like if I try to eat ripe fruit, it's way
Mm-hmm.
too sweet for me. I cannot. If you, it's weird. If you cook fruit into something, you can take all the berries you want and put it into like a crumble or something, and I'll eat
Mm-hmm.
it. But if I'm eating just the raw fruit, it, I cannot tolerate the amount of sweetness. Even, I mean, this sounds
Wow.
so weird, but like, I buy bananas when they are really green. And if they
Oh
just
wow.
turn a little bit too yellow for me, I can't eat them. I hate the taste. It's very
Hmm.
strange. Give me all the savory food and I'll eat the lot. I will demolish every bit of savory food you give me. But sweet food, I'm really picky with. I'll have
Oh,
honey.
that's
Weirdly, I don't know why I've developed like I can have every day I
hmm.
have porridge and I'll put a little bit of honey into it. Um, maybe I don't know. I was gonna say it's because it's naturally sweet, but so's fruit, so it doesn't really make sense to me. So
Yeah.
because of that, I never really developed. Then I didn't eat chocolate throughout most of my childhood. So and
Mm-hmm.
all the times I did eat chocolate, I was too young. I didn't have a conscious memory of it. So then when it came to then, now I'm older, I don't. I still actually have the allergies, weirdly, to certain things. I had a situation a few years ago when I took some like anti-flu tablets
Mm-hmm.
during my doctorate, and I actually and one of they had it like a casing around the powder for the it wasn't a tablet, it was actually a proper capsule, but the capsule had coloring in it, and the coloring actually caused me to have like an allergic reaction. I had like a rash all over my hand, which I'd never had before. And it was only then when I suddenly
Wow.
realized, well, let's look at the list of ingredients, and I started seeing all these e numbers. I started investigating, like, oh yeah, they cause allergies like hand rashes and whatever. But then when it came to eating chocolate, I knew I would never eat like the really sweet chocolate. So then I just tried, dark chocolate. But
Yeah.
it's
That's what
it's
I was
not
gonna
it's just
ask you about because not all
it's just
chocolate is
bitter.
sweet.
True,
Yeah.
but it's just I don't find it very special when you eat like really dark chocolate. It's just bitter,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really
Hmm.
find it very special. So I'm just like, okay. And it's funny. My
Interesting.
friends at school used to find it really weird that I didn't eat chocolate until then they learned the advantage. If I suddenly got, from whatever reason, chocolate ended up in my possession from a present
Mm-hmm.
or as a prize at school, whatever, I would always give the chocolate to them.
There you
So
go.
they used it to their advantage. They suddenly realized once that sort of chip got changed, like, oh, Johnny doesn't eat chocolate. He's really weird. Oh, we get the chocolate. There you go. Right. So that's how
That's
that
funny.
worked. So yeah, follow up. Yeah, so we had the pizza. That was weird. I don't want to see anymore. After that fish and chip pizza, I closed that website down. I just don't want to look anymore.
Yeah. There
Um,
was a that just to quickly follow up on the chocolate thing. There was also a period in my life where I could not eat chocolate, but that is because I ate so much chocolate one time that I made myself horribly sick.
oh,
And as part of the like instinctive reaction, my body could then just associated chocolate with being sick. So there
right.
was a period of like 5 years where I couldn't eat chocolate. But that period is over and I have a massive sweet tooth. I'm like the opposite of you. But yeah,
Um,
to get on with the pizza, there was the other thing because I was noticing that this website was referencing pizzata a lot. So I
yeah.
thought, okay, well, let's go to their website and just pull up some pizzas that you can order. And so I went to that website as well. And I think you can just look, like scrolling down, just how busy a lot of Japanese pizzas look and how weird some of the ingredients are. And we don't have to spend too much longer on this, but I did want to call out the one specific Pizzara de Mariachi, which is the
Which
I
one's
don't I
that?
don't even
It's all in
uh
Japanese. I don't have a clue what that is.
yeah. That's the problem. You can't really follow it. Let me try and get back because I've already clicked on the link. Uh, I mean, viewers at home can't. They're watching Stardew Valley. They can't follow along with
I
this
know this
anyway.
is. We'll put the link in the. I'll put a pinned comment with any links and stuff. Oh, there's heart-shaped pizzas. What is going on?
Yeah. So if you go to the top of the site,
Yep.
the first three rows is the first row consists of three pizzas. The second row of three pizzas, all the way on the right, that one is the Pizzara
Oh.
de Mariachi, and you should be able to see the day actually.
I've got a problem. I'm looking at it on my phone. There's only 2 pizzas per row.
Uh-oh.
Oh
Well, maybe
no,
it's still the sixth. Maybe it's still the sixth pizza.
the
The
sixth
the
one.
day in is written DE in English.
Yes, yeah. I seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that one. And you should be able to click on the top right. There's a little thing that says it's like grayed out. It's got two little characters there. You should be able to click on that, and that'll give you the details for the full pizza. Where they've given you, oh look, they've got little English versions here. So they've got mochi mentaiko pizza. Mentaiko is that uh, walleye pollock roe that I was talking about before. They put that on top of mochi, and they put that on top of a pizza. They've got the teriyaki chicken
Yeah,
again, and they've
yeah.
got carne asada de koku uma beef.
Ah,
Koku is like a deep, rich flavor. Uma is delicious, and then beef. So
so
rich,
sorry.
tasty beef with
Do you,
carne
do you
asada.
do you say what's carne asada? Because carne is meat in Spanish.
Yeah, I think it's a Mexican dish that's a specific preparation of beef.
Ah.
I've looked this up before. I've looked up carne asada before because I thought, doesn't that just mean like some type of meat? I had, I had the same question. Um,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, the last time I looked it up, I remember thinking, oh, okay, it's like a specific version of beef prepared, I think, in Mexico, which is why they called it the Pizza de Mariachi because it's like a mariachi band.
Ah. Really dig into the stereotypes.
Apparently.
Does it come with a jigsaw? What is that box on the right hand side?
Oh, I've made the mistake of closing the window.
There's like a box on the right. You got for the viewers who can't see this. There's like the pizza on the left hand side with, yes, you got the teriyaki chicken and whatever, and then on the right hand side you got like 2 extra things with like a plus in between. So I guess you get them, but the top one is a box, but it looks like there's a picture of a boy band on the front, but it looks like a jigsaw puzzle box. I'm so confused by this. And then in the bottom one, there's a picture of like a woman crying into a pillow.
Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, you can collect all 9 varieties. It looks like it's a little collectible. Japan standard. I need pizzala. So I think that's just a little bonus that you get with the pizza. And then the pizzala, that's probably the pizza box,
Oh, okay.
if I had to guess. Yep.
But the pizza box comes with like a boy band image on the box.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Gotta get that marketing money.
Absolutely.
Why not?
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you. These pizzas look incredibly busy.
Yeah. That's just something about like the way that Japanese people think of pizza is you're supposed to not be able to see the pie.
Well, that's another thing that we do different. British people don't say pie for pizza. We just say the dough
Ah,
or the crust. We don't, or the crust would be the outside bit or the base. We never say the word pie.
interesting.
That's something that, I mean, someone might now correct me on that, but as far as I'm aware, um,
Certainly not common. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, I don't say pie very often in relation to pizza, but it's not like unheard of.
I've heard
So,
it when I'm listening to like yeah, any sort of like American TV series. I do hear the word pie a little bit, which
yeah, it
does
doesn't come up all the time, but it does come up, right? It's
Mm,
that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. Whereas in the UK, my gut reaction to that would be that it's never used. It's not something
Yeah,
I would ever say. For
interesting.
me, a pie is like steak and ale pie or a lemon
Mm-hmm.
meringue pie where you've got pastry on the outside, but it
Mm-hmm.
goes up like as a bowl shape, and then you fill the pie with something, and then you put a lid on top of the pie to close it, and then it's baked in the oven. Or something like a lemon meringue pie, you got the base, and then you put the meringue on top, and then it sets. Um,
Right. Yeah,
Never
we use
ever
pie in
looked at
that
pizza
sense.
as
We use
well.
pie in that sense as well. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, though, in the US, are all pies sweet?
Most pies are sweet.
Okay,
The typical pie that you'd think of in the US is a sweet pie. That's
right.
not to say that we don't make savory pies, but if you're talking to an American and you mention, "Oh, let's get some pie," they're not thinking of going to get a meal. I mean, unless they're thinking in the context of pizza, and even in that case, that would be a little bit weird. I think it would be somewhat unexpected to, without any other context, just to be like, "Hey, let's go have some pie," and then go to a pizza place. I think that would be weird even for an American.
Right, okay.
I think if you say, "Hey, let's go have some pie" to a typical American, they would expect to get some sort of sweet pie, some sort of dessert. Uh, Even though we do make savory pies, it's just much less common. It's not like the stereotypical pie.
Right. Whereas I would say in the UK, it's the reverse. If you say the
Mm-hmm.
word pie to a British person, my gut feeling is that they would immediately associate the word with savory. Going to a pub and having steak and kidney pie or steak and ale pie or something like that. Or if you're from Cornwall, Stargazy pie. If you don't know what that
Huh?
is, I will, I will,
No.
I'll ping a picture to you right now about that. 'Cause I want
Oh,
your
cool.
reaction. That's gonna be a fun one for you.
A stargazy pie.
I think it's Stargazy. Is it? There, yeah, Stargazy Pie. That's the one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Give me 2 seconds. This is thrilling for the people who are listening to this.
Does
I'm
it
gonna.
involve lots of corn?
No,
I'm
not at all.
thinking of like sprinkles like stars.
There you go. I've pinged it in the Discord for you.
What is this? It's got like spires. It's like a sandcastle.
Yeah. Those are fish heads sticking out.
Oh, those are fish heads. It's so small I can't see it. Oh.
So people
Wow.
don't know. Yeah, Stargazy Pie is I think the actual base is fish, if I'm not mistaken. But then, yeah, you take the fish heads and you stick them out so they're facing upwards as the pie cooks, and you just serve it like that. I think it's only in Cornwall. Yeah, in the southwest of England. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Interesting. That's wild.
Oh yeah, pilchard sardines. Right, eggs and potato. There you go. The one on Wikipedia is even worse because worse depends on how you view it, I suppose. Because the fish heads, rather than being upright, they're sticking out at the side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it just swam in the wrong place.
Yeah, exactly. They're trapped there and they're sticking their heads out like, help me. Yeah, wacky. Yeah, yeah. What else was in follow? Oh yeah, so a very quick comment that I'm sorry, I'm gonna forget. I think it might be is it Hayden who commented it? I'm gonna feel really bad if I got that wrong. I'm really sorry. Uh, there was a comment about Germany culture shocks because I did mention the fact that I'd gone to Germany for a year abroad, and we didn't end up talking about culture shocks from Germany. I do have a couple, but the thing is, my time in Germany is this is really complicated to explain, but we're going there. Because people who don't know, before join for this podcast, one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this podcast or this sort of type of video in the first place, very different from the normal videos I do, is because it was inspired by a Scottish YouTuber who does League of Legends videos, but every single year at Christmas he does this sort of long form video where he just chats and has gameplay in the background, to keep people company, literally think about it from a loneliness mental health perspective. When I was on my Erasmus in Germany, my mental health was absolutely terrible. And it's something now I look back and I really regret it. But at the time, I wasn't really functioning like properly, and I didn't really realize, the how I would feel about it afterwards. But when I was in Germany, I didn't really explore very much. I was very much a hermit inside, the place where I stayed. I did go off for bike rides around the local area and stuff, but I didn't really travel, and I didn't really interact with the native population very much, which is a huge regret for me, especially the reason why I wanted to go to Germany in the first place was because I have German ancestry. My grandmother was German, and I'm really gutted by the fact I didn't get to really meet her. She died when I was too young, and I don't really have a memory of her, even though she did meet me. And I always heard about, this German ancestry from this side of my family, and all the stories about that and languages and all that sort of thing. So I always wanted to go to Germany a lot. I've been on holiday, I've been on school trips, and I wanted to go on my Erasmus there because I wanted to reconnect with this, this place that my grandmother came from, even though it was a different part of the country. But I didn't get to
Mm-hmm.
explore very much. So as a result, I didn't experience the same culture shocks as you would like now. I'm here, living and working in the country, and I'm actively trying to interact with the native population. Same with yourself when you were in Japan. You were very much
Yeah.
interacting with, the native base, and you would then experience, everything we talked about in the previous podcast and culture shocks. The main culture shocks I experienced in Germany were that the Germans are incredibly impatient, but not in a. It's a different type of impatience to what I get in Spain.
Hmm.
Germany's impatience is more from the fact of they are so efficient with their time. They want everything to be done in this very, ordered, methodical way. And if you are even slightly deviating from their timeline of events, then they will be a bit annoyed with you.
Hmm.
Classically, honking, you at the traffic light if the
Ah.
light has gone green, you haven't gone within the first split second of the light
Mm-hmm.
turning green. In here it happens too. I had it a couple of days ago. I was doing a driving class, and it was literally like 2 minutes from the driving school. I was finishing my hour and a half class, and there was a taxi driver behind me. I was the first car in the line. The light went red, and I was literally just getting the biting point because I was doing manual car to drive off. Taxi driver behind me was blowing the horn at me, and I was even just like, "What are you doing, mate?" Like, it's not like I've been here 5 seconds. The light has literally just gone green. What are you doing? So I think it's a different thing. I feel like in Spain there is an impatience, but it's more from a sort of Spanish people are very expressive. So
Mm-hmm.
when they're happy, they're very happy. When they're annoyed with you, they're very annoyed. There's this. It's quite sort of roller coaster, very extreme. In Britain, it's a lot
Hmm.
more mellow. Uh, we
Yeah.
we're not so extreme with our emotions so much. In Germany, it's more impatience from a you need to be functioning in this specific timeline. If you're deviating, I had an experience. I was working in a university for that year, and I
Okay.
remember just doing lab work. I can't remember what I was doing, maybe washing up my lab stuff or whatever. And basically, this is now going to get a little bit. I was in a chemistry lab, so I'm going to get a little bit technical here. But when you're trying to wash glassware and stuff, if the dirt and the chemical residue is a bit stubborn and you can't wash it
Mm-hmm.
with water, you put it inside basically a bath of acid, and it sits there for a
Mm-hmm.
few hours or overnight, and then the acid eats away with it, and then you can just wash it off the next day. But these acid baths obviously get very contaminated, and every so often they have to get changed. I was busy washing my stuff. Two PhD students walk in and be like, "We need to change the acid bath," and I was very clear, and because we were speaking in English, there was no way they misunderstood me. It's not like I was trying to do it in my crappy German. And I said, "I'm just finishing. Give me a second, and I'll be out your way," because I was in the space that they needed to use. No, they literally walked in that very second. They were like, "Move,"
Wow.
and I was just like, "Really? I've got like two more things to wash. Can you not wait like 1 minute?" No, no, that was just not. They were not. I was not cooperating with what they wanted to do.
Huh.
So that was one thing. I can't think of anything else really off the top of my head. Punctuality, it was quite funny when we used to go on school trips, and we used to do like the meeting with all the parents and stuff before we went on a
Mm-hmm.
school trip, and our teachers telling us, Britain's got this kind of, at least in Spain, Britain's got this perception of being quite punctual. We were
Mm-hmm.
told you have to be more punctual. If they say you have to arrive on the hour, you have to arrive 10 minutes before. They are very,
That's very,
very, very ordered in this way, very protocolic, very
very,
do by the rules. Um,
very similar in Japan.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was told when I went to Japan, they said if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you might as well commit seppuku.
Wow.
Which is it's a joke, but
Yeah,
it's
sure,
a
sure, sure.
funny way of getting across. Like
Yeah,
socially, you need to be somewhere before,
yeah.
like ideally
Expected.
before that thing starts, right? If they give you a time, if you show up on time, you're late.
Haven't I heard if the bullet train, the Shinkansen, is that how you pronounce it? I'm going to pronounce that wrong.
Shinkansen.
Inkansen. Where's the Shen bit at the
Shin.
beginning? Does that not
I don't
exist?
know. Discord might be cutting off the start, but it is Shin. Shinkansen.
Oh right, okay, Shinkansen. Okay, maybe it's just Discord being Discord. That's fine. Okay,
Yeah.
it wasn't me. Yeah, okay, Shinkansen. Okay, if the train is late, do you not get like a note from the train company for your boss at work saying, "Yes, I was delayed"?
Yeah, that doesn't have to be the Shinkansen. That can be any train.
Oh really? Oh nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so that just shows the
Yeah.
level of
Because
punctuality that
so,
exists.
so many people rely on public transit that if there's something that's an issue with it, they feel like they need to explain that it wasn't your fault that you're late. And yeah, to your
Wow.
point, it does show the extent to which punctuality is important in Japan.
Whereas even in Britain, they just wouldn't give a shit about that at all. It's
Yeah.
funny now. I when I was in Germany, I thought the trains were amazing compared to the UK. They were on time, they were clean and efficient. Now, apparently, the German train service has got really bad recently. And there was a
Oh
YouTube
no.
series I watched called Jet Lag, and they did like a game of tag around Europe, and they're doing public transport. And yeah, the minute they got into Germany, everything went wrong. Every train was
Oh.
cancelled. They got delayed. And then they ended up getting caught because of it. Yeah, I know. Whereas in the UK, sometimes you're lucky if you get a train. Yeah, it's just funny how
Wow.
these like sort of international sort of perceptions of certain things just don't really get borne out in reality, or maybe they are, but in some aspects, but not every aspect. That's kind of the weird thing about it. So yeah, that's basically. Sorry, I wish I could be sitting here and really go into detail about culture shocks in Germany. I don't really have many, just because of just my sort of experience with, especially the one time I was like independently living in Germany, I was not in
Hmm.
the best state of mind, and I was just
Hmm.
not at all looking at let's go and experience a car. And now I regret it. I really, I've said it so many times. I wish I went to go. I always wanted to go and see Berlin, just because of the
Hmm.
history and everything. Never saw Berlin. Um, literally my only you know, expeditions, I guess you'd call it that way, quote unquote, was to go to the next biggest city a couple of times to see a couple of Bundesliga football matches, and then to see a concert in Hamburg at the end of my year. That was it. And I had dreams of going around all around Germany in my free time. That didn't happen. So that's something I've got to live with. Now, hopefully, later on in life, I can rectify that a little bit. But
Yeah, that's what I
yeah,
was gonna say. Like, you'll probably have the chance to go back and rectify that situation.
I hope so. I really hope so. But obviously, I've got all of Spain to discover now. So,
That's right. That's
so
right.
yeah, sorry I couldn't provide more comment about it, but that's basically the answer to that one. And then the other one that you've put in is about, because we're talking about, we must have mentioned it in part. I couldn't remember if that was something we did in the podcast or it was in passing about learning to drive, and then we're talking about automatic or manual cars in Japan, and I see that you've put like a little link to that. So you
Yes. So I think it did come up in the podcast because I remember speculating on like whether or not the automatic versus manual transmission rates were different, and my suspicion was that the automatic rates were higher than my experience indicated because all my friends were driving manual transmission cars because they were old. And I discovered in researching that so I found out I was just looking for like what's the rate of new car sales manual versus automatic, and it's sort of like the U.S. It's 99%. It's either 98 or 99% automatic transmission in terms of new car sales.
wow.
But I also found a separate stat because apparently in Japan, and I don't remember this being the case when I was getting my license, and I don't know what it's like in Spain, but apparently in Japan, when you go to get your driver's license, you can specify, I want to get my license for a manual transmission or I want to get my license for an automatic transmission. And it's like a separate set of programs.
Oh wow.
Is that different? That must be different in Spain then.
I think so. I haven't personally heard of any difference from what I remember from the theory aspect of things. The licenses are only based upon literally the type of vehicle that you can drive. But
Yeah, that's
there
how
was
they do it in the States.
no distinction between automatic or manual. So it'll literally just be from your own personal perspective. Can I actually drive this thing or not?
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's how it is in the States. But apparently in Japan, you can choose. I want the manual. I want to take lessons and get licensed in manual transmission or automatic. And the automatic is like a less demanding course. And the manual, if you pass that one, so if you pass the automatic, you cannot pass or you cannot drive manual transmission cars legally, is my understanding.
Right.
And if you pass the manual, you can drive automatic cars because it's an easier step down as opposed to the step up in difficulty that comes with a manual transmission. So I thought that was super interesting, and I found a couple blogs from like a year or two ago that were saying that the rate of license applications is roughly 30% right now. 30% of people go for a manual transmission license as opposed to 70% who get the automatic, even though the new car
Really?
sales vastly like the number of automatics vastly over outnumbers the number of manuals in terms of
That
sales.
that's really interesting. So are they doing it
Yes,
because of like the second-hand market, or because they're thinking about if they go overseas?
I don't know. I like you've found the extent of my research, but I was intrigued and I was like, that's interesting. I should I should bring this up in the next
Hmm.
video to keep you company.
So,
So yeah,
so I
they've got the two different licenses, and there's a higher. I think they get the manual because I think probably the primary motivation, if I had to take a guess, is just being able to drive anything out there. Is probably the
mhm.
secondhand market more than anything, especially because there
Sure.
are a lot of classic Japanese cars or like cars. The other thing that you get is cars at the very high end, like very like sporty type sports cars. They tend to be manual in Japan.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna go for if you're maybe to some extent it's aspirational, right? If you're gonna go for one of the supercars, maybe you want to be able to drive manual. And so yeah, I think in terms of practicality, that's something to there's something to be said for that. And then of course, I think it was like the first thing I said, right? Because if you get the manual, you also get the automatic. They just want to
Yeah.
be ready for anything.
No, that makes a lot of sense practically. And I'm also looking that the in the article saying that the average cost of lessons and then the testing inclusive of tax is only about 20,000 yen more for the manual license. And I'm just looking like if it's between 287,000 and 303,000 yen,
Hmm.
that doesn't seem a huge difference to me. So,
Right?
um, unless I'm
Yeah.
misunderstanding the currency.
No, you're good. Yeah. So you might as well spring for it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I did notice um, when I was back in the UK recently, the village or the town that we were in for the event we were attending, we just walked past a car that had the fact that it was an automatic driving school,
Hmm.
and I'd never seen that before. I hadn't realized that they would
Interesting.
have specialized automatic driving schools, but or if it's a private tutor or whatever. I find that really interesting. Um, I think because I said we were talking about it, in Europe, there are so many more manual cars about. Obviously, with the sort
Yeah.
of the hybrid and electric vehicles becoming more popular, yet then they're more automatic based then. But the electrical vehicle market really hasn't taken off like it has done, I would assume, in Japan and then also in the States.
Hmm.
So for the good, let's say for the foreseeable future, there's going to be still a really strong need to have knowledge of manual cars in Europe.
Hmm.
Whether or not that will change in my lifetime, I don't know. But yeah, it's still very much most people who've learned to drive, they learn to drive in manual. It's so restrictive if you only learn automatic. I mean, yeah, sure, when you buy your own car, that's fine. But then once if you go
Hmm.
abroad, you're trying to hire. Once if they don't have an automatic car or whatever, or if you have to drive one
Hmm.
for an emergency or something, yeah, having manual is pretty vital.
Yeah. This reminds me. There was a there was a news story. There probably have been several of these over the years because it's been a long time since manual was super popular in the US. But I remember relatively recently hearing a news story about a guy who decided to steal a car and was completely unable to actually steal the car because it was manual transmission. So he got in, got the woman and her kid out of the car, and drove onto the sidewalk sideways and then just had to stop driving. He had to get out and try and get another car, and they arrested him.
That'd be like I don't know what I can't remember what the names of them in the UK was called police camera action, like those police chase
That's
Like
right. Yeah.
just
Cops.
him constantly stalling, going down the road,
Yeah.
and the police just like, do we box him in? Ah, give him a bit of a head start, it'll be fine. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what that's it. That's a pro tip to any hijackers out there. check the pedals before you commit to the hijacking.
That's right. You can't steal the wrong kind of car. You won't get very far.
Oh. I don't know what we do. We're according to the footage, we only have 2 minutes left before it starts looping, and we've only done follow up plus just our own spontaneous conversation. We've got like a list of like main topics, and we haven't done any of them. What do we do?
I don't know. I mean, to be continued, I think.
I think
I
that's
feel like this is
yeah.
it's
I think that
been
might
a
be the
fun
case.
2 hour conversation, and I feel like if we try and push things further, because once we get into the main topic, the reason we made it the main topic is because we knew we could take a while to talk about. So I feel like we'd just be shortchanging it if we try to squeeze it in at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Yeah, so I think we'll have to put a pin in it. I'll go off and record some more Stardew Valley at some point, and then we'll have to meet up again. And well, it means we won't have any follow up to do. We can just go bam straight into the main topic, and we won't get
Which,
distracted.
if you think about it, you're going to be traveling over the summer anyway, so it sort of worked out.
Yeah, yeah.
We
For
don't
people
have
who
to. It was going to be awkward trying to work in further feedback segments, so we gave you a feedback special, and now
exactly
we're going to focus on the main topic next time, and it's all gone according to plan. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
all planned.
All according to plan.
Oh, so yeah, people who are watching it. So the way we're gonna do it, I'm if people who maybe new subscribers or thank you for the subscribers by the way. I have seen there's been some new subscribers, so thank you very much.
Yes,
For
thank
new
you for.
viewers,
I've
right?
seen a few people subscribe to my channel as well. Thank you so much.
Yay, that's good. Nice. I like that when collaborations work out. That's excellent. Obviously, I mean, these videos have been done, as I said, to keep you company. That is the primary function of them. If it keeps one person company, then it's done its job. But it's really nice.
Absolutely.
It's nice to see so much feedback, just either from likes or comments or subscribes or whatever. It's really really nice. So I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, so basically for people who don't know, normally the way I do it, I take a summer hiatus. As we are kind of talking about it in the previous podcast, with international life, if I'm spending most of my time in Spain, then summer is for going back to the UK and seeing family and friends and whatnot, and also just enjoying the Scottish countryside because it's so beautiful. So yeah, so that means all the videos you'll see from this point on the channel would have been recorded quite a bit in advance. So yeah, this is the July episode of Keeping You Company. The August one will be recorded in advance. The September one will be recorded in advance, and I'll be back properly. So beginning of September to start recording again. So that's the deal. So yeah, that's why there's going to be a bit of a lag in terms of if we talk about something, we might not be able to give as much feedback on it, but if you want to give any feedback, do write comments or message me on Discord or whatever you want. Don't worry, we will see comments. We're not going to ignore comments, but just be aware that in the next podcast, we might not be able to respond to comments. I will probably write a personal comment if that's the case as a reply. But if it's something, like I think it was. I'm gonna double check because I don't want to get the name wrong. That'll just do my head in if I get it wrong. I loaded up a YouTube video to show you. Whenever we haven't got onto that, that'll be the next podcast. That's gonna be so weird. That was a thing I mentioned to you, and you just gave me like so many question marks when you saw what I wrote, and I was like, yeah, we'll talk about it. Oh no, it's on my community post. That's where it was. It wasn't on the video. It was Hayden. There you go. I'm glad I got that right. Sorry, people. That was agonizing to sit through. So what was I saying? Yeah, so like a comment like that about, living in Germany, we were able to respond to it in this one. So yeah, please, do feel free to comment, but just be aware that it might take time to get round to it. But we will get round to it. We've got a document, we'll throw it in, and then we'll get round to it.
Yeah, and like I was saying in the last episode, like as a YouTuber, when you don't get any comments at all, it makes such a difference when you get like an actual response. It's like Yeah, okay, I know I can see the number of views, and especially with the last one, the number of views was driving me I thought I didn't know what was happening. I had to pace back and forth in my apartment till I calm myself down. But so it's not like it has no effect. But seeing comments, seeing people be like, "Hey, this was engaging, and I really liked this, and I didn't like." It's like you get this all of a sudden. It's like, oh, someone is watching, right? They
Mhm.
are listening. They're talking back. So that's what I in particular tend to look for, at least at this point in time. I'm sure there are YouTubers out there who are just like, I've got too many comments. They're such annoying. Like, dude, leave me alone. But that's not where I am in my YouTube journey. So I really appreciate any comments that gets. I've been checking the comments too, Scott Sword. I've been like periodically refreshing your video, and they've all been great.
Absolutely, yeah, and exactly the same because we're quite small channels, so we're not being bombarded with comments every day. But every comment we get, we see. And even like it depends. I try to reply as much as possible, but if I feel I can't really give a meaningful comment, um, I will always give the special content creator emoji where you got like the avatar with the heart. Um, that's just my way of saying I've seen your comment and I really appreciate your comment. And I know it might seem quite a lazy way to do it, but if you see that, that is a comment from me basically saying I appreciate you. Thank you very much for leaving a comment on my video. And because we see everything. It's been lovely.
Absolutely.
Oh well. Thank you again for joining, Rook. I think this is gonna be a regular thing at this point. This is going too well.
I think it has to. Like we just filled time for the whole first hour talking about whatever we wanted. So
Yep,
I think that's a very positive indication.
absolutely. So hopefully
We don't need a
everybody
main topic to
enjoyed it.
just talk for
Nah,
two hours.
no, that's great. The fact we know we can do that, and hopefully all the people. It's quite interesting too, just seeing the way that I've heard from people like the way they use these videos, either the one that we've just done or the ones I did before. There was
Mhm.
somebody comment on the previous one who definitely said, "Oh yeah, I want something when I'm gaming to have something to listen to," and that's just great. I mean, that's really nice.
Yeah.
I do that with podcasts all the time.
Hmm.
Depends what the game is, obviously. But if something like Stardew, the footage that you're seeing for this video, I would have recorded it listening to Spotify or listening to a podcast. That would have been definitely what I would have been doing. So yeah, whatever way you consume this video, if you're watching it or listening to it, that's just great, and it's really nice to hear. So yeah, thank you very much, Rook, for joining. It's been a great little chat. It's really made my Friday evening, to be honest. This has been awesome.
Likewise, it's always a pleasure coming on and getting a chance to talk with you, and thank you for having me back.
And we'll be back for more at the beginning of August. Depending if there's more Stardew Valley content, then we might be able to sneak in a few more episodes in between. We'll have to see. It all depends on scheduling and stuff. We're both very busy, so we'll try our very best to get at least two more for August and September, and then we'll see if we can get something else in between. Then we'll see. We'll take it as it comes. Yeah, thank you for watching, Rook. I'll see you again very soon,
Sounds good.
and take care,
I'll
everybody. Oh, want
thank
to
you
go?
all for watching as well. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Seconded. Amen. Yeah, thank you for watching, everybody. And take care. I hope everything is well with all of you. And if not, if you're having a bit of a tough time, then I hope this video made it a little bit better. And I hope everything will be fine soon. Take care, folks. See you very soon. Bye bye.
Bye.